Imagine walking onto a prestigious, internationally televised stage to do your job, only to be met with a booming broadcasted racial slur. That is exactly the nightmare Hollywood heavyweights MichaelBJordan and DelroyLindo walked directly into at the 79th BAFTA Film Awards. But what if I told you the true horror of this story isn't just the word that was shouted? What if the real scandal is a calculated, behind-the-scenes setup by the network executives themselves? Welcome back, truth seekers. Today we are pulling back the velvet curtain on an industry that loves to preach diversity, but practices something entirely different when the cameras are rolling. The internet is currently in a state of absolute meltdown over what went down on that London stage. The official narrative tells us it was an unpredictable, uncontrollable medical accident. They want you to look at the perpetrator, analyze the science, and politely move on. But we do not play by the industry playbook here. When you look at the raw, unedited timeline of how this broadcast was handled, a deeply disturbing pattern begins to emerge. We are talking about a pre-recorded ceremony with a massive 2-hour tape delay. A delay specifically designed to catch glitches, technical errors, and yes, highly offensive language. Yet, somehow, the production team managed to completely erase a black filmmaker's speech about human rights, while leaving a devastating racial slur perfectly audible for millions of viewers at home. Was this truly a catastrophic technical oversight? Or was it a weaponized editorial decision designed to generate viral shock value engagement at the absolute expense of 2 black men? Buckle up, because we are diving deep into the leaked administrative panic, the institutional double standards, and the explosive industry fallout that BAFTA never wanted you to see. The industry wants you to believe that television production at this level is a chaotic, unpredictable beast, where things just happen to slip through the cracks. They want you to think a multi-million-dollar broadcast, managed by hundreds of highly trained media professionals, operates with the same lack of oversight as a chaotic live stream in a basement. But let us strip away the public relations shielding and look at the absolute mechanics of how high-profile award ceremonies actually work behind the closed doors of production trucks. When an event of this magnitude is put together, especially one featuring elite global talent, every square inch of the venue is wired for sound and monitored by multiple layers of technical directors. There are microphone arrays hanging from the ceiling, directional boundary mics lining the stage, and isolated audio feeds dedicated to capturing ambient crowd noise. In the production truck parked right outside the venue, an entire wall of monitors displays real-time feeds while audio engineers sit with their hands on multi-channel mixing boards. Nothing gets to the broadcast server by accident, and absolutely nothing gets transmitted to the public without passing through a sequence of deliberate human decisions. This specific ceremony was operating under a strict 2-hour tape delay, which in the television industry is an absolute eternity for an editing team. A 2-hour window means the technical directors do not just have time to catch an error, they have enough time to review the footage, consult with network compliance lawyers, re-edit the audio track, and completely smooth over any unexpected disruptions. Yet, when MichaelBJordan and DelroyLindo walked out to present the award for Best Visual Effects, the system suddenly experienced a highly selective, unprecedented failure. As they stood under the bright house lights, ready to celebrate a vital technical achievement in cinema, a booming, unmistakable racial slur cut through the high-end audio mix of the auditorium. The word did not just echo weakly in the background, it registered clearly on the main audio tracks, cutting through the ambient noise with chilling clarity. In that exact moment, inside the production room, a series of urgent internal communication lines should have lit up instantly with commands to log the timecode and prepare the digital audio workstation for immediate censoring. Standard network protocol for any major broadcaster dictates that severe profanity, let alone a devastating racial slur, must be completely bleeped out, dropped to 0 decibels, or replaced with ambient room tone before transmission. Instead, the decision-makers behind the master control console chose to let the tape roll forward exactly as it was captured, allowing that targeted hostility to remain a permanent fixture of the public broadcast. When the edited package was wrapped up and delivered to millions of households, the slurry outburst remained fully audible, turning a professional workplace achievement into an arena of public humiliation. The official narrative dropped onto the public within hours, wrapping the entire incident in the convenient protective blanket of a medical condition. The network rushed out a statement explaining that the individual responsible was an acclaimed filmmaker who suffers from Tourette's syndrome, a neurological disorder characterized by involuntary tics and verbal outbursts. We are told by the industry defenders that this was simply a tragic manifestation of coprolalia, a specific subtype of the condition that causes individuals to blurt out obscene or socially unacceptable phrases entirely against their will. The mainstream media immediately ran with this explanation, shifting the spotlight away from the actual victims on stage and demanding that the public show immediate empathy and clinical understanding toward the perpetrator. The conversation was instantly redirected into a masterclass on neurological health, with commentators writing lengthy essays on how neurons misfire under stress and how the human brain can produce offensive sounds without any underlying malice. But this academic defense completely falls apart when you apply basic situational logic to the geography of that specific room. Neurological tics are fundamentally random, non-specific biological misfires that do not possess an internal radar system for racial identity or social context. If an involuntary outburst is truly a localized storm of random neural activity, it does not wait patiently until two prominent African American actors step into the center of a stage to manifest its most specific, racially targeted terminology. The odds of a completely random, non-targeted neurological misfire perfectly aligning with the exact moment two black men are isolated in the spotlight are astronomically low. Yet, the public is being told to swallow the idea that this was just a cosmic coincidence, an unfortunate alignment of stars where biology just happened to look identical to deliberate, weaponized workplace harassment. What makes this clinical defense even more difficult to accept are the whispers now escaping from the inner circles of London digital media agencies and independent production crews. Leaked internal emails from within the broader network apparatus suggest that this individual has a documented, repeating history of experiencing these highly specific verbal outbursts, almost exclusively when in proximity to high-profile black professionals. Rumors have intensified regarding previous incidents at industry mixers, rap parties, and independent screenings where similar specific slurs were reportedly directed at minority crew members, only to be quietly swept under the rug by production companies eager to protect their funding. If these accounts are accurate, it means the network was fully aware of the volatile nature of the individual they were inviting into the main auditorium, yet they chose to place him in a prime seating arrangement without establishing any protective barriers or technical safeguards. This leads us directly to the most damning aspect of the entire broadcast timeline, which completely exposes the hidden hierarchy of network priorities. While the audio technicians and executive producers were busy deciding that a targeted racial slur was perfectly acceptable for public consumption, they were simultaneously showing an incredible amount of speed and precision when it came to censoring a completely different part of the evening. Later in the night, a highly respected independent filmmaker named Akinola Davies Jr. took the stage to accept an award for his latest project, using his platform to deliver a deeply moving acceptance speech. He spoke passionately about the importance of archiving personal histories, preserving the stories of marginalized communities, and explicitly called for the liberation of oppressed peoples globally, ending his remarks with a direct call to free marginalized populations in conflict zones. There was no profanity in his speech, no hatred, and absolutely no violation of broadcasting standards. It was a peaceful, eloquent expression of human solidarity and artistic resistance. Yet, before the broadcast ever reached the public, the network editorial team went to work on his segment with a digital scalpel, completely cutting his closing statements out of the televised version. The contrast between these two editorial choices is nothing short of breathtaking. On one hand, you have a black filmmaker speaking about global peace and human rights, which the network immediately identifies as a dangerous, controversial threat that must be hidden from the eyes of the public. On the other hand, you have two legendary black actors being subjected to the most painful, historically loaded slur in the English language, and the network treats it as a completely neutral, uneditable piece of live reality that audiences simply need to witness. They possess the exact technical capability, the editing software, and the administrative time required to clean up the broadcast, but they chose to use those resources exclusively to silence a message of liberation while amplifying a message of degradation. When you look at this dynamic through a forensic lens, the claim of an accidental oversight completely evaporates, revealing a conscious allocation of network power. They protected the comfort of a specific, politically sensitive demographic by silencing a peace speech, while completely abandoning their basic duty of care toward the black artists who were literally on the clock performing professional duties. The utter coldness of the institutional response became even more apparent when details began to surface regarding the immediate aftermath of the stage disruption. When an unexpected incident of this scale occurs on a high-stakes television set, the standard corporate protocol involves an immediate intervention by stage managers, talent executives, and human resource representatives. You would expect that the moment the cameras cut away to a commercial break or a pre-tape segment, a team of high-level network officials would have rushed to the green room to check on the well-being of MichaelBJordan and DelroyLindo. You would expect an immediate, formal apology, an offer of security, and a transparent explanation of how such a monumental breach of workplace safety was allowed to occur under their watch. Instead, according to sources intimately familiar with the backstage environment, the silence from the executive suite was absolute and deafening. DelroyLindo later confirmed to major media outlets that absolutely nobody from the organization had the common decency or professional respect to approach them after the incident took place. They were left completely in the dark, forced to process the emotional shock of a public assault, while the production team around them continued running the show as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. The network treated the entire moment not as a human crisis requiring immediate empathy, but as an awkward logistical blip that was best ignored until the guests cleared the building. This total lack of administrative follow-up proves that the institutional disregard for Black dignity was not a localized failure by a single audio editor, but a top-down corporate culture that views minority talent as entirely expendable props. They were happy to collect the prestige and social capital that comes with hosting global icons like Jordan and Lindo, but when the time came to defend their humanity in a moment of crisis, the executives vanished into the shadows. The compounding weight of this mistreatment has sent shockwaves through the global entertainment community, causing many to question the true nature of the sudden creative boom surrounding the perpetrator's film. It is highly worth noting that the individual who shouted the slur was not just a random attendee, but the central subject of a heavily pushed, deeply sentimental documentary that was actively competing for major accolades that evening. This realization pulls us deeper into the dark, speculative underbelly of how modern media conglomerates manipulate public outrage to manufacture viral relevance for their chosen creative projects. The entire value proposition of that specific documentary rested on the narrative that individuals with neurological tics are constantly misunderstood, unfairly vilified, and cast out by an unforgiving, hypersensitive modern society. By allowing a real-time, highly shocking demonstration of this exact dynamic to play out on a massive, internationally televised stage, the network effectively created a real-world marketing campaign for the film. The outburst did not ruin the evening for the production executives. It gave them the ultimate piece of controversial, high-engagement content that would dominate the global news cycle for weeks to come. They transformed a moment of profound racial trauma into a weaponized publicity stunt, leveraging the pain of two Black performers to validate the central thesis of a film they were actively trying to promote. This strategic exploitation of controversy points to a much larger, highly coordinated effort within the upper echelons of the network to script a narrative where institutional accountability is entirely erased. As the public backlash began to mount online, an intricate web of leaked administrative memos and confidential internal communications started to bleed out from the network's high-security servers, painting a vivid picture of a corporate hierarchy in complete, unmitigated panic. These internal documents reveal that the decision to leave the slur in the broadcast was not a passive mistake, but a point of intense, calculated debate among senior executives who were weighing the financial metrics of controversy against the ethical obligations of broadcasting standards. According to these highly sensitive leaks, an emergency meeting was called in the master control room immediately following the stage incident, where high-level television producers actively debated how to leverage the moment for maximum digital footprint. One specific memo highlights a cynical calculation made by a senior programming director, who openly stated that removing the segment would rob the network of a historic, highly discussable television event that would drive unprecedented traffic to their streaming platforms. The executive board was fully aware that airing a targeted racial slur against top-tier Hollywood actors would spark an instantaneous global firestorm on digital platforms, resulting in millions of hate watches, clip replays, and non-stop media coverage. In their eyes, the emotional well-being and professional safety of Jordan and DelroyLindo were minor casualties compared to the massive spike in quarterly engagement metrics that a raw, unedited controversy would guarantee. This cold, analytical commodification of anti-black racism shows exactly how the entertainment industry operates behind its performative marketing campaigns for diversity and inclusion. They do not see human beings standing on that stage. They see data points, viral clips, and highly monetizable moments of friction designed to keep audiences glued to their screens. The depth of this corporate corruption goes even deeper when you look at the secret financial ties connecting the network's executive producers to the independent distribution company behind the Tourette's documentary. Financial disclosure logs indicate that several high-ranking network decision-makers hold substantial personal investments and shadow equity in the production house that stood to gain the most from the film's public notoriety. By ensuring that the documentary's subject became the center of an explosive, globally trending debate about disability rights versus racial slurs, these executives effectively guaranteed that the film would secure lucrative international distribution deals. The entire incident begins to take on the distinct shape of a calculated financial operation, an administrative trap where black talent was intentionally walked into a hostile environment to generate a massive return on investment for a network-backed creative asset. The public relations apparatus was mobilized with terrifying speed to construct a sophisticated narrative shield, utilizing a network of bought and paid-for media elite to flood the airwaves with pre-written defense pieces. Major entertainment publications immediately began running carefully coordinated op-eds that completely minimized the gravity of the workplace assault, reframing the conversation as a test of societal compassion toward those with severe neurological challenges. These articles, written by prominent cultural critics who regularly receive exclusive access and financial perks from the network, subtly gaslit the public into believing that any anger directed at the broadcast was a form of ableist discrimination. They created an artificial moral binary where you were either an enlightened, deeply empathetic consumer who understands the complex nuances of involuntary tics, or you were an aggressive, uneducated reactionary who wants to criminalize a disabled man for a biological misfire. This psychological manipulation was deliberately engineered to paralyze any meaningful critique of the network's editorial malice, forcing the public to litigate the biology of Tourette's syndrome rather than investigating the deliberate actions of the television producers. The absolute refusal of the network to address the specific surgical censorship of a Kenola Davies Jr. speech while keeping the slur intact proves that their editorial guidelines are entirely fluid, shifting instantly to serve their overarching political and financial agendas. When independent journalists pushed the network's communications department for a clear explanation regarding this blatant double standard, the corporate spokespeople retreated behind a wall of vague, legally bulletproof boilerplate language about scheduling conflicts and runtime constraints. They claimed that the filmmaker's speech was trimmed purely because the broadcast was running over its allotted time slot, an explanation that is laughably fraudulent to anyone who understands the rigid, pre-planned mathematics of television programming. They had more than enough room to accommodate a 30-second plea for human rights, but they chose to use that exact timecode to ensure a targeted racial slur was delivered to the public without a single millisecond of interruption. This administrative reality strips away the last remaining shred of plausible deniability, exposing a calculated institutional plot to normalize hostility toward black bodies while aggressively suppressing any artistic expression that challenges global power structures. As the digital landscape continued to fracture over this revelation, the absolute hypocrisy of the entertainment industry's disciplinary standards became impossible to ignore, especially when contrasted with how they handle controversies involving minority creators. For years, the corporate elite have maintained an ironclad policy of immediate, uncompromising cancellation for any minority figure who steps out of line, completely stripping them of their livelihoods, endorsements, and professional access without a single moment of administrative hesitation. The most prominent example of this unilateral corporate warfare remains the total systemic dismantling of Kanye West, following his public breakdowns and highly offensive statements in the media. When West, a black man with a severe, heavily documented, and clinically diagnosed mental health condition, experienced a profound psychological collapse in the public eye, the industry did not assemble a panel of medical experts to lecture the public on the nuances of bipolar manic episodes. They did not publish high-minded op-eds, urging the global audience to show deep compassion for a brilliant mind suffering from an unmedicated neurological storm that distorts reality and speech patterns. Instead, the global corporate apparatus moved with terrifying synchronized execution to completely erase him from the commercial grid within 48 hours. He was instantly blacklisted by major talent agencies, his lucrative design partnerships were unilaterally terminated, his music was stripped from premier curated playlists, and his net worth was systematically decimated overnight as multinational corporations competed to see who could distance themselves the fastest. Corporate executives stood before microphones to declare that mental illness is never an excuse for spreading harmful rhetoric, establishing an absolute moral standard that actions have immediate, devastating consequences regardless of underlying clinical diagnoses. Yet, the moment the perpetrator of a public assault is a white, network-backed filmmaker with a neurological condition, that entire ironclad framework of absolute accountability instantly dissolves into a pool of academic nuance and administrative leniency. Suddenly, the industry demands that we halt all disciplinary actions, slow down our moral judgments, and spend weeks reading medical textbooks to understand the precise mechanics of involuntary verbal outbursts. This massive, undeniable divergence in corporate discipline reveals a deeply entrenched racial double standard where white medical trauma is treated as a complex, protected sanctuary that absolves an individual of all social harm, while black psychological trauma is treated as a moral failing that justifies complete financial execution. The network executives who engineered this broadcast knew exactly what they were doing when they applied this double standard, relying on a long history of systemic bias to shield their commercial decisions from true accountability. They understood that the modern media landscape is highly conditioned to accept black suffering as a natural, expected byproduct of entertainment, while white discomfort or white cancellation is viewed as an existential tragedy that must be prevented at all costs. This calculated exploitation of societal bias has left the global creative community in a state of intense, seething resentment, as independent artists realize that the institutions meant to honor their work are actively functioning as hostile entities. The psychological toll on the victims themselves cannot be overstated, as they are forced to navigate a toxic professional environment where their very presence is weaponized against their own community. To be a black professional in an industry of this scale means constantly walking a tightrope, knowing that you are always one administrative decision away from being subjected to public degradation for the sake of a network's quarterly profit margins. The total lack of administrative support provided to MichaelBJordan and DelroyLindo in the wake of this televised assault has sent a clear, chilling message to every minority creator working in the digital space today. The message is simple. When you enter these institutional spaces, you enter them at your own risk, because the corporate machinery will never protect your humanity if there is a more profitable viral narrative to be mined from your humiliation. This grim reality has sparked a massive underground movement among elite Hollywood talent, who are quietly organizing a high-level boycott of future network-backed award shows until a complete, transparent investigation into the production trucks timeline is made public. Confidential sources within major talent agencies indicate that several A-list actors and directors have already instructed their representatives to decline any invitations to participate in upcoming broadcasts managed by this specific production team. The industry is facing a massive, unprecedented labor crisis, as the performers who generate the actual value for these televised spectacles refuse to continue serving as collateral damage for an unethical corporate elite. The network's public relations team is working around the clock to contain this growing mutiny, desperate to prevent a full-scale talent drain that would permanently destroy the commercial viability of their flagship entertainment brands. But their empty promises of future policy reviews and performative sensitivity training are completely failing to de-escalate the situation, because the public has finally seen behind the curtain and recognized the true nature of the corporate setup. The controversy has taken on a life of its own, transforming from a temporary media scandal into a historic reckoning over who controls the narrative, who decides what content is safe for public consumption, and whose pain is allowed to be monetized for global entertainment. As the legal teams for the affected actors begin preparing a multi-million-dollar workplace discrimination lawsuit against the broadcaster, new details are emerging about the exact sequence of events that transpired inside the editing suite during those critical 2 hours of tape delay. Leaked audio logs from the internal intercom system reveal a chilling lack of empathy among the post-production crew, with technicians openly laughing about the shock value of the stage outburst, while actively cutting down the filmmaker's speech about human rights. The recording captures a senior audio editor explicitly stating that keeping the slur in the final cut would secure the network a historic ratings victory, demonstrating a complete and total awareness of the social destruction they were about to unleash on the world. This audio evidence completely demolishes the network's public claim of an accidental oversight, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that the entire broadcast was a highly orchestrated, deeply malicious corporate setup designed to prioritize financial metrics over human dignity. The revelation of this internal audio has sent the network's stock prices into a downward spiral, as major corporate sponsors begin pulling their advertising campaigns to protect their own brand identities from the radioactive fallout of the scandal. The institutional elite are discovering that the public is no longer willing to accept their performative apologies or their clinical excuses, demanding nothing less than the immediate resignation of the entire executive board and a complete restructuring of broadcasting compliance laws. The battle lines have been drawn, and the fight for creative control over the digital media landscape has entered its most volatile phase yet, with the truth finally catching up to an industry that has spent decades hiding its systemic corruption behind the glamorous illusion of the red carpet. Every single piece of administrative data, every leaked memo, and every edited frame of that broadcast points to a singular, undeniable truth. The system did not fail by accident. It functioned exactly as it was designed to, exposing a deep-seated institutional malice that can no longer be ignored. As we look toward the shifting horizon of digital commentary, it becomes overwhelmingly clear that this moment will go down in media history as the ultimate exposure of network priorities, a definitive turning point where the performative mask of the entertainment industry was permanently ripped away. The consequences of this broadcast will reverberate through executive boardrooms for generations, serving as a stark reminder that when you attempt to weaponize racial trauma for corporate profit, the truth will eventually mobilize to tear your entire empire down. The global audience has found its voice, and they are using it to demand an end to the strategic gaslighting, the weaponized double standards, and the total lack of care that has defined the corporate entertainment apparatus for far too long. The momentum is building, the leaks are continuing to pour out, and the executive elite have completely run out of places to hide as the full scope of their administrative setup is laid bare for the entire world to judge. This brings us directly to the final, most critical layer of this corporate chess game, where the true motives of the network's legal department are brought into sharp, unyielding focus. In the hours leading up to the global transmission, while the public relations team was busy drafting their preemptive apology letters, the network's high-priced corporate defense attorneys were already constructing a massive legal fortress designed to insulate the company from any impending workplace safety lawsuits. Internal legal briefs show that the attorneys advised the executive board that by framing the entire incident as an unpreventable, non-targeted medical manifestation of Tourette's syndrome, they could effectively shield themselves from any claims of hostile workplace negligence under international labor laws. They intentionally weaponized the clinical definitions of a neurological disorder to create a bulletproof legal defense, turning a legitimate human crisis into a highly technical debate over statutory medical compliance. They did not care about the psychological impact on MichaelBJordan or DelroyLindo, nor did they care about the cultural damage inflicted upon the millions of viewers who would be forced to hear that word broadcasted into their living rooms. Their sole, unwavering priority was the total preservation of corporate asset sheets and the complete elimination of any financial liabilities that could arise from their deliberate decision to broadcast a targeted assault. This cold-blooded legal strategy reveals the ultimate horror of the modern media landscape, a space where human dignity, professional respect, and historical trauma are continuously processed through an administrative machine that calculates the cost of human suffering against the value of viral engagement. The network's calculated silence, their surgical censorship of global peace speeches, and their aggressive legal maneuvering all point toward a future where independent minority creators must completely reclaim their narrative power from these corrupt institutional gatekeepers. The era of trusting these legacy networks to protect our stories, our artists, and our humanity is officially over, replaced by a fierce, uncompromising demand for total transparency, independent media ownership, and absolute corporate accountability. The full breakdown of this administrative failure is not just a collection of shocking leaks and corporate scandals. It is a definitive blueprint of how institutional power operates in the digital age, and it is a blueprint that we must thoroughly dismantle piece by piece. We are standing on the precipice of a massive structural revolution in how media is produced, analyzed, and consumed, and the fallout from this specific broadcast will be the catalyst that drives that revolution forward into the light of absolute truth. The corporate gatekeepers have played their final hand, relying on their traditional playbook of medical gaslighting and administrative silence, but they completely underestimated the collective intelligence and unyielding resolve of a global audience that refuses to be lied to any longer. The narrative belongs to the people now, and as the final pieces of this explosive corporate setup continue to fall into place, the institutions that built their empires on the monetization of our pain will have no choice but to watch their walls come crumbling down around them. The industry is currently scrambling to construct its next diversion, desperate to find a new headline that will shift the public's attention away from the damning evidence filling the digital space. But the momentum is too massive and the evidence is too concrete to be swept away. We have tracked the timeline, we have deciphered the administrative codes, and we have exposed the hidden financial pipelines that turned a prestigious awards stage into a weaponized arena of corporate warfare. There is nowhere left for the network executives to run, no more medical nuances they can hide behind, and no more performative corporate apologies that can wash away the stain of their calculated editorial choices. The truth is out, the setup is exposed, and the consequences are about to be delivered with absolute, uncompromising precision. The administrative panic inside the network's executive suites did not stop with the initial broadcast decisions. As the midnight hour approached on the night of the ceremony, the digital infrastructure of the broadcasting company began to buckle under the weight of an unprecedented, global wave of public fury. Automated sentiment analysis algorithms, which the network uses to monitor real-time audience reactions across platforms, began flagging the broadcast with severe crisis alerts. The metrics were completely off the charts, showing a near-unanimous condemnation of the network's editorial choices from audiences spanning London to Los Angeles. Inside the corporate communications headquarters, an emergency task force was assembled to contain what was quickly becoming the largest public relations disaster in the broadcaster's modern history. Senior executives, still dressed in their formal gala attire, paced back and forth in front of large projection screens displaying a relentless, rapidly updating feed of digital condemnation. The primary objective of this midnight assembly was not to find a way to apologize authentically to MichaelBJordan and DelroyLindo, but to deploy a highly sophisticated digital counteroffensive. They needed to regain control of a narrative that was rapidly exposing the deep, systemic double standards embedded within their editorial leadership. According to confidential disclosures from a mid-level digital analyst who was present in the war room that night, the network immediately initiated a secret content suppression protocol. Orders were sent down to automated moderation systems to quietly downrank, shadow ban, and restrict the visibility of user-uploaded clips showing the unedited stage disruption. They utilized advanced audio signature matching software to automatically flag and remove any independent video essays that attempted to analyze the exact moment the racial slur was broadcasted. By suppressing the raw visual evidence, the network hoped to turn the concrete, historical reality of the event into a vague, debatable rumor that could be easily managed by corporate spin doctors. At the exact same time, a highly coordinated network of anonymous corporate proxies began flooding alternative digital spaces with fabricated investigative leads and deliberately misleading leaks. These manufactured documents were designed to shift the blame entirely away from the executive producers and place it squarely on the shoulders of low-level, temporary technical contractors. One specific leaked narrative claimed that a rogue freelance audio mixer had intentionally overridden the master control console's automated delay system due to a personal grievance against the production company. This elaborate fabrication was designed to serve as an administrative sacrificial lamb, giving the public a singular, disposable villain to blame while completely insulating the true decision-makers from institutional liability. But the modern digital audience is far too sophisticated to be deceived by traditional corporate misdirection strategies, and the pushback only grew more precise and forensic. Independent media researchers and audio engineering professionals began downloading the broadcast's high-definition master files and running them through advanced spectrogram analysis software. The scientific results of these independent audio investigations were nothing short of explosive, completely obliterating the network's claim of an accidental, unnoticeable technical oversight. The spectrogram readouts clearly demonstrated that the frequency levels of the shouted slur had been manually adjusted, compressed, and equalized during the post-production phase to ensure it remained perfectly intelligible against the background music. This means that an editor did not simply fail to hear the word. They actively sat at a digital audio workstation, isolated the specific track containing the racial slur, and optimized its acoustic clarity for the final televised export. The broadcast was not a victim of passive negligence. It was the recipient of active, deliberate creative polish designed to maximize its auditory impact on the viewing public. When these forensic audio reports began circulating widely across alternative news networks, the corporate wall of silence finally cracked, forcing the network's highest-ranking director of television compliance to issue a hasty, highly defensive internal memo. In this document, which was intercepted and published by an independent investigative journalism collective, the director openly admitted that a total omission of the segment would have resulted in severe contractual penalties from international streaming distributors. The memo revealed that the network had signed a lucrative, multi-million-dollar syndication agreement that explicitly required the inclusion of all raw, unscripted auditorium disruptions that occurred during the filming process. The corporate executives had literally commodified the potential for chaotic human suffering, turning the real-time degradation of black performers into a contractually guaranteed revenue stream for their global media empire. This financial revelation transformed the public backlash from a standard cultural debate into a massive, structurally organized economic boycott targeting the network's premier corporate sponsors. Within 48 hours, grassroots activist coalitions and independent digital media advocacy groups launched a highly targeted campaign called the Absolute Accountability Initiative. The initiative published a comprehensive, real-time database detailing every major consumer brand that had purchased high-ticket advertising slots during the broadcast commercial breaks. The digital public mobilized instantly, flooding the customer service channels and executive email inboxes of multinational automotive corporations, luxury fashion houses, and elite telecommunications providers with non-negotiable demands for immediate divestment. The economic leverage of the global audience was applied with devastating precision, forcing the chief marketing officers of 3 top-tier corporate sponsors to issue frantic public statements announcing the immediate suspension of all future advertising contracts with the network. These massive brands openly stated that they could no longer align their corporate values with a broadcasting institution that actively amplifies weaponized racial hostility, while aggressively censoring messages of global peace and human rights. The sudden loss of tens of millions of dollars in guaranteed ad revenue sent shockwaves through the network's financial accounting departments, triggering an instantaneous drop in their parent company's public stock valuation. The institutional gatekeepers, who had spent decades operating under the assumption that they were entirely immune to external economic pressure, suddenly found themselves staring into a massive, unmitigated financial abyss. As the corporate empire began to show deep structural fractures, the internal culture of fear and non-disclosure within the network studio complex began to dissolve completely, leading to a historic wave of administrative whistleblowing. Disgruntled production assistants, verified stage managers, and veteran camera operators began utilizing encrypted communication channels to leak a continuous stream of raw, unedited backstage footage to independent commentary channels. Among these highly sensitive leaks was a stunning, high-definition video sequence captured by a stationary security camera position directly outside the main talent green room during the live production. The footage showed MichaelBJordan and DelroyLindo standing in the hallway immediately after exiting the stage, their faces visibly strained with intense emotional shock and profound professional frustration. The raw video captured them waiting patiently for over 20 minutes, looking around the corridor in anticipation of an administrative intervention or a basic check-in from the high-level executive producers who were supposedly managing the venue. Instead, the footage documented a succession of senior network executives, talent handlers, and celebrity liaisons literally walking right past the 2 legendary actors, intentionally averting their eyes and quickening their pace to avoid having to address the crisis. The utter lack of human empathy displayed in these leaked security tapes provided a devastating visual confirmation of everything the public had suspected about the network's internal rot. It proved that the corporate leadership did not view the televised assault as an urgent human emergency requiring immediate care, but as an uncomfortable administrative liability that was best ignored until the talent left the premises. The public release of this backstage footage completely broke the back of the network's ongoing public relations defense, rendering their pre-written statements about duty of care and workplace safety laughably fraudulent in the eyes of the world. The narrative firestorm quickly leaped across international borders, prompting formal inquiries and stern condemnations from global entertainment unions and international actors' guilds. The Screen Actors Syndicates issued a joint, non-negotiable administrative mandate demanding that the network submit to a completely independent, third-party forensic audit of their entire post-production timeline and internal email servers. The guilds explicitly warned that if the network refused to comply with the transparency audit within 7 business days, they would authorize a total withdrawal of all guild-registered talent from future network-managed television productions. This meant that the network was facing the immediate, existential threat of a complete industry shutdown, a total labor strike that would leave them entirely unable to produce their premier scripted dramas, high-profile reality series, and lucrative holiday specials. The executive board was trapped in a vice grip of their own making, caught between the unyielding economic demands of their remaining corporate sponsors and the absolute structural rebellion of the creative labor force that generates their actual wealth. Desperate to find an emergency escape hatch, the network's legal defense team attempted to orchestrate a highly controlled, deeply manipulative public reconciliation stunt involving John Davidson. The plan, which was outlined in a highly classified corporate strategy brief that was subsequently leaked to the digital underground, involved setting up a tightly scripted, televised joint interview between Davidson and a selected panel of media-trained cultural commentators. The objective of this performative event was to utilize Davidson's genuine neurological struggles as a massive, emotionally manipulative human shield to permanently deflect the ongoing structural critiques of the network's corporate hierarchy. The attorneys intended to force a narrative closure by showcasing a deeply sentimental, highly produced moment of mutual understanding and clinical education, effectively telling the global audience that if the medical community was satisfied, the public had no right to remain outraged. But this cynical strategy completely underestimated the fierce, independent agency of the Black creative community, which refused to allow their profound historical trauma to be utilized as a public relations prop for corporate preservation. Representatives for the impacted talent immediately issued a fierce, preemptive legal warning to the network, stating that any attempt to utilize the incident for further televised engagement metrics would be met with an immediate, multi-million-dollar defamation and workplace harassment lawsuit. The actors made it crystal clear that they would not participate in any corporate-sponsored public relations spectacles, demanding nothing less than structural systemic reform, the immediate termination of the senior editorial leadership, and a complete overhaul of broadcasting standards. The lines of communication between the talent and the network were completely severed, leaving the executive elite entirely isolated in their corporate boardrooms, as the digital landscape outside continued to organize for their ultimate downfall. The crisis had officially evolved past the point of a temporary media scandal, transforming into a historic, irreversible reckoning over the hidden mechanics of modern media manipulation and institutional power. The global audience remained completely unyielding, their collective intelligence and digital coordination continuously outmaneuvering every single public relations diversion, strategic leak, and psychological gaslighting tactic the network attempted to deploy. As the financial losses continued to mount and the threat of an absolute labor strike loomed larger by the hour, the upper echelons of the network began to turn on each other in a desperate bid for individual survival. High-level programming directors began leaking damning internal documents incriminating their own executive colleagues, exposing a toxic, cutthroat corporate culture where human dignity was routinely sacrificed for the sake of quarterly entertainment dominance. The internal warfare within the network's highest executive suites soon boiled over into the public eye, turning a corporate cover-up into an absolute mudslinging match. High-ranking vice presidents began hiring independent legal counsel to distance themselves from the catastrophic decisions made in the master control room on the night of the broadcast. Leaked transcripts from these closed-door executive exit interviews reveal that the network's internal structure had completely fractured into warring factions. One faction was desperately trying to preserve the traditional legacy system of total administrative secrecy, while another faction was ready to burn the entire corporate structure down to save their own professional reputations. As these internal recriminations intensified, independent financial journalists uncovered a secret paper trail detailing a massive wave of insider stock dumping that occurred just hours before the unedited ceremony hit the airwaves. Corporate records show that 3 senior members of the network's executive board had quietly liquidated millions of dollars in company shares, suggesting they knew the impending public firestorm would permanently damage the network's market value. This financial revelation added a highly combustible layer of corporate corruption to the existing crisis, drawing the immediate attention of federal trade regulatory bodies and government financial fraud units. The network was no longer just facing a public relations disaster over systemic racial bias. They were now staring down the barrel of a full-scale criminal investigation into corporate insider trading and financial malfeasance. While the executive suite was descending into absolute legal chaos, the grassroots economic blockade organized by the global digital audience was entering its most devastating phase. The Absolute Accountability Initiative had successfully expanded its corporate boycott list to include the international television distribution syndicates that purchased the network's overseas broadcasting rights. Major media networks across Europe, Asia, and Latin America began facing intense, localized public pressure from their own domestic viewing audiences to sever all ties with the toxic London broadcaster. Within 72 hours, the largest digital streaming platform in North America officially announced that it was indefinitely suspending its multi-billion-dollar content acquisition contract with the network, effectively pulling all of the network's premium scripted content from its global library. This single economic blow stripped the network of its most critical source of international revenue, causing their parent company's stock to plunge by an unprecedented 34% in a single trading session. The financial markets were sending a clear, unyielding message to the entertainment industry. The deliberate monetization of racial trauma is no longer a sustainable or legally viable corporate business model in the modern digital era. Desperate to protect what little institutional credibility they had left, the network's remaining board members attempted to pass a series of superficial, performative policy updates designed to pacify the global audience. They announced the immediate creation of an independent diversity oversight committee, promised to invest millions of dollars into minority-led content creation initiatives, and pledged to install mandatory real-time bleeping software for all future pre-recorded broadcasts. But the global commentary community and the independent digital public completely rejected these empty corporate gestures, recognizing them as nothing more than a superficial public relations band-aid meant to protect the underlying system of oppression. Cultural commentators across digital platforms pointed out that creating a new administrative committee does absolutely nothing to address the senior executives who actively chose to amplify a racial slur while surgically silencing a speech about global human liberation. The public demand remained entirely non-negotiable. Nothing less than the immediate public termination of the network's chief executive officer and the full, unedited release of all internal communication logs from the night of the broadcast would satisfy the collective call for justice. The network's performative compliance strategies were completely failing to de-escalate the situation, because the audience had finally realized that true accountability cannot be negotiated with the very individuals who engineered the crisis. The psychological dam had thoroughly broken within the entertainment industry, leading to an extraordinary, unprecedented display of solidarity from independent production crews, union set designers, and veteran television engineers. Elite camera operators and technical directors who had worked for the network for decades began stepping forward to publicly refuse any future production assignments involving the executive producers responsible for the setup. They openly stated that they would not allow their technical expertise to be utilized as a tool for weaponized workplace harassment, completely paralyzing the network's ability to film its highly anticipated summer broadcasting lineup. The television network was experiencing a massive, bottom-up labor mutiny, proving that the creative working class holds the ultimate power when they choose to organize against an unethical corporate hierarchy. As the network's production studios fell completely silent, the legal teams representing MichaelBJordan and DelroyLindo officially filed a historic multi-million-dollar class action workplace discrimination lawsuit in high court. The comprehensive legal filing contained over 400 pages of forensic evidence, including the leaked audio logs of post-production technicians laughing about the shock value of the slur, and the internal memos prioritizing quarterly engagement metrics over human decency. The lawsuit did not just seek massive financial damages for emotional distress and professional negligence. It explicitly demanded a binding legal injunction that would permanently strip the network of its broadcasting license if they failed to implement total structural reform. The legal document pulled back the final corporate veil, transforming the entire controversy from a temporary internet debate into a monumental, legally binding trial regarding the fundamental human rights of Black performers in global media spaces. With their financial infrastructure collapsing, their creative labor force on absolute strike, and a historic federal lawsuit threatening their very existence, the network's executive board finally surrendered to the unyielding pressure of the global public. In a historic, somber digital broadcast transmitted to millions of viewers worldwide, the chairman of the network's parent company stood before the camera to announce the immediate, unconditional resignation of the chief executive officer and the entire senior editorial leadership team. The chairman openly admitted that the network had committed a catastrophic, morally indefensible breach of its public trust, acknowledging that the decision to broadcast the racial slur, while censoring the speech of Akinola Davies Jr., was a definitive manifestation of institutional bias. They announced a complete, legally binding restructuring of the network's charter, transferring absolute editorial control over to an independent trust, managed by verified representatives from marginalized creative communities. This total institutional surrender marked a historic milestone in the history of digital media, serving as an absolute validation of the power of independent commentary, collective economic leverage, and unyielding public resolve. The corporate gatekeepers had deployed every single weapon in their traditional playbook, from medical gaslighting and content suppression to strategic leaks and legal intimidation, and they had still been thoroughly defeated by a global audience that refused to accept a manufactured reality. The fallout from this legendary controversy has completely redefined the operational matrix of the global entertainment industry, establishing a permanent precedent that human dignity can no longer be sacrificed for the sake of viral corporate profit. Legacy networks across the world are currently overhauling their production pipelines, rushing to implement strict new protective protocols for minority talent, because they realize that the modern digital public is actively watching, analyzing, and waiting to dismantle any institution that steps out of line. The victory belongs to the truth seekers, the independent creators, and the millions of conscious consumers who stood shoulder to shoulder to demand an absolute end to the weaponized double standards of the corporate media elite. The narrative has been permanently reclaimed from the corrupt executive boardrooms and placed back into the hands of the people, where it will remain protected by the unyielding vigilance of a global community that knows the true value of its own voice. As we close the chapter on this historic investigative breakdown, let this be a definitive warning to every remaining media conglomerate operating in the digital space. The performative masks have been permanently ripped away, the hidden pipelines have been thoroughly exposed, and the era of corporate manipulation is officially over. We have peeled back the layers of corporate greed, exposed the secret executive memos, and witnessed the absolute power of a united global audience. This historic victory proves that when we stand together, the corrupt gatekeepers of legacy media cannot hide from the absolute truth. But this fight is far from over, and the matrix of media manipulation is always looking for new ways to monetize our silence. The corporate elite have lost this battle, but they are already working behind closed doors to rebuild their broken networks. Now I want to hear directly from you, the true heartbeat of this channel. Do you believe this historic executive resignation will bring real, permanent change to the entertainment industry, or is it just another performative corporate shift? Drop your raw, unfiltered thoughts in the comments section below, because your voice is the ultimate weapon against institutional gaslighting. Let us turn the comments section into a definitive arena of deep cultural analysis. If you want to keep receiving these deep forensic breakdowns, make sure to smash that like button right now to push this video through the algorithmic suppression filters. Share this broadcast with everyone who values media transparency and independent reporting. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss a single moment of these breaking investigative truths. Stay vigilant, keep questioning the official narratives, and I will see you in the very next exposure video.